When we talk about the idea, say it until you see it. We have to begin with one foundational truth. Your words are not random sounds floating into the air. They are indicators of what you believe, architects of what you expect, and often the very catalysts of what eventually forms in your life. Human beings think in language, interpret reality through language, and shape identity through language. So it's no surprise that the direction of your life is strongly influenced by the direction of your speech. What you choose to say consistently becomes the internal script you live by, whether you realize it or not. Most people speak reactively. They look at circumstances, interpret them, and then verbalize the interpretation. But this approach leaves you trapped under the weight of whatever is happening around you. It keeps you in a posture of psychological passivity, responding rather than leading. Yet every great shift in human behavior, every breakthrough in personal development, every spiritual transformation begins when a person decides to speak beyond what they see. That's when words become more than commentary. They become intention. Think about it this way. Your words are the steering wheel of your inner life. They turn your attention. They influence your emotions. They shape your expectations. And over time, what you expect begins to influence the choices you make, the risks you take, and even the opportunities you recognize. This is not just spiritual language. It's backed by psychology. The brain is constantly filtering reality through what you repeatedly affirm. If you're always saying, "Nothing ever works for me," your mind begins scanning for proof that reinforces that belief. If you start saying, "I am growing, I am changing, I am becoming stronger," your brain starts searching for evidence to support that instead. This is why speaking intentionally is such a powerful discipline. It interrupts the patterns that keep you small. It forces your attention to shift from the immediate to the possible. And over time, it trains your heart to believe what your mind may not yet understand. But here's the key: your words must be chosen with precision. Empty positivity doesn't change much, but language rooted in conviction, shaped by purpose, and aligned with what you know to be true deep down, that changes everything. When your words match your deeper values and long-term vision, they become a force that gently but consistently pushes your life in that direction. You've probably experienced moments when you spoke something out loud and felt your confidence rise. Not because the situation changed, but because you changed. That's the function of faith-filled speech. It stabilizes your inner world. It clarifies your intention. It activates courage. And courage, more than talent or luck or strategy, is often what creates progress. There's also a philosophical dimension to this. Human beings are meaning makers. We don't live by events. We live by the meaning we assign to those events. And meaning is shaped by language. If you say, "This challenge is the end," you collapse under it. If you say, "This challenge is the beginning," you rise above it. The same moment, the same conditions, the same facts, yet completely different outcomes, simply because of the words you chose. This is why it matters to speak deliberately, especially when circumstances feel overwhelming. The moments when you least feel like speaking hope are the moments you most need to. Not because speaking magically erases difficulty, but because it grounds you in a deeper truth, that you are not defined by what you see right now. You are shaped by what you believe enough to speak repeatedly. even spiritually. This principle resonates on a profound level throughout history, biblical, philosophical, and psychological. There is a consistent message. Your words are connected to your becoming. What you repeatedly confess, you eventually internalize. What you internalize, you eventually believe. And what you believe, you inevitably begin to embody. So when you speak, you're not performing a ritual. You're positioning yourself. You're saying, "This is the direction I refuse to abandon. This is the truth I choose to live toward. This is the identity I am stepping into." And with enough consistency, the internal shifts begin to surface externally. Circumstances start aligning with conviction. Behavior begins aligning with belief. Opportunities start matching your expectations. Your words lead the way. If there's one takeaway, it's this: don't let your speech be dictated by what you see. Let it be guided by what you're becoming. Because the life you're moving toward starts with the words you choose today. Say it with intention now, so you can see it with clarity later. When we move to the next idea, aligning your confession with the promise rather than the problem, we're really talking about one of the most transformative mental and spiritual disciplines a person can develop. Most people don't realize how easily their speech bends in the direction of whatever they're feeling in the moment. If they're discouraged, they speak discouragement. If they're overwhelmed, they speak overwhelm. If they're afraid, they speak fear. And without noticing it, they allow temporary conditions to dictate long-term narratives. But the real power of intentional speech is found in choosing what you say, not based on what's happening around you, but based on what you want to cultivate zezers within you. When your words start lining up with a promise, an ideal, a conviction, a deeper truth, you begin to shift the internal landscape of your mind. Your speech stops being a reaction and becomes a declaration. And that shift changes everything. There's a subtle but important distinction here. Acknowledging a problem is not the same as empowering it. You can recognize what's real without allowing it to set the boundaries of your future. The problem is a fact, but the promise is a direction. The problem describes where you are, but the promise guides where you're going. And whichever one you speak about the most tends to become the dominant force in your emotional world. From a psychological standpoint, this makes perfect sense. The human brain is naturally biased toward threats, limitations, and negative information. It's a survival mechanism. So if you only speak what you see, and what you see is difficulty, your mind becomes saturated with stress signals. But when you intentionally speak what aligns with hope, growth, and belief, you interrupt that cycle. You're essentially retraining your internal narrative, shifting your brain out of survival mode and into possibility mode. You're teaching yourself that your life is not dictated by your present difficulty, but guided by your deeper intention. Think about it like adjusting a compass. If your speech constantly identifies the problem, you keep walking in the same circle emotionally. But when you speak the promise, whether that promise is spiritual, personal, or philosophical, you reset the compass toward a higher direction. You give your mind something new to organize itself around. Philosophically, this principle also runs deep. Human beings have always wrestled with the tension between current reality and future potential. What you speak reveals which one you've chosen to align with. If you continually speak from the level of your present struggle, you confine yourself to it. But if you speak from the level of your intended identity, your stronger self, your wiser self, your future self, you begin pulling your life upward to meet that expectation. This is why your words matter most when your circumstances look the worst. Anyone can speak with confidence when everything looks certain, but speaking from a place of faith, clarity, or conviction when everything looks opposite. That's where inner strength is truly forged. You're not pretending the problem doesn't exist. You're simply refusing to give it the final word. You see this pattern in people who overcome incredible setbacks. They don't deny the difficulty, but they refuse to let the difficulty define them. Their language reflects what they believe is possible rather than what appears inevitable. And that orientation, the decision to align words with a deeper promise, is what sets them apart. Of course, this alignment doesn't happen automatically. It's a practice. It requires awareness of what you're saying, honesty about why you're saying it, and a conscious decision to shift the direction of your confession. And sometimes, especially in moments of pressure, it requires courage, because speaking the promise when the problem feels overwhelming is not namavi. It's an act of self-governance. It's the decision to anchor yourself to meaning rather than to fear. But something remarkable happens when you start doing this consistently. Over time, your internal environment starts to reflect the promise more than the problem. You begin noticing solutions you missed before. You start thinking more creatively, responding more calmly, and believing more deeply. And gradually, the external world begins to shift as well, not magically, but organically. The inner change begins to influence the outer one. So when you speak, choose the promise. Choose the direction you want to grow toward. Choose words that elevate your perspective rather than shrink it, because your life follows your language. And aligning your confession with truth, purpose, hell, and possibility creates a path that problems cannot erase. Speak what strengthens you, not what shrinks you. And you'll find your life rising to meet your words. When we move into the idea of consistency, the notion that you don't just say something once, but you keep saying it until it reshapes the way you think. We're diving into one of the most misunderstood but essential dimensions of transformation. Most people underestimate the role of repetition. They imagine breakthroughs happen through sudden moments of inspiration, a single declaration, or one emotional surge of confidence. But real change, the kind that sticks and reshapes a person from the inside out, rarely comes from a single moment. It emerges from steady, consistent action, especially consistent speech. What you repeat becomes familiar. What becomes familiar becomes believable. And what becomes believable eventually becomes natural. This is why consistency is the bridge between saying and seeing. It takes the abstract and makes it solid. It takes something that begins as an idea and slowly turns it into a reality within your own mind. The challenge is that repetition can feel mundane. It feels slow. It feels like nothing is happening. And that's exactly why so many people stop too soon. They assume the lack of immediate results means their words aren't working. But the process of internal reorientation is subtle. It works underneath the surface long before it shows itself outwardly. Just like a seed grows roots before it grows leaves, your words establish internal structure before they produce visible change. Consider what happens psychologically when you repeat something consistently. You begin rewiring your cognitive framework. You disrupt old mental patterns. You challenge long-held assumptions. You interrupt negative scripts that have been running on autopilot for years. And every time you repeat a truth, an affirmation, a declaration aligned with your intention, you're strengthening a new neural pathway. That pathway becomes a route your mind learns to travel more easily. Eventually, it becomes the default route. And when your mind defaults to belief rather than doubt, or to hope rather than fear, everything in your life begins to orient itself differently. But consistency requires patience. It requires a long view of your own development. You don't quit speaking just because the external situation hasn't caught up. You keep speaking because you understand something deeper. The words are doing their work internally, shaping your perception, sharpening your focus, and preparing you for opportunities that may not yet be visible. Spiritually, this principle is mirrored in countless examples. Faith is not a moment, it's a practice. It's the act of choosing, again and again, to speak from conviction rather than circumstance. Kenneth Hagin often emphasized that faith works by speaking and then holding to that confession. Not for a minute, not for a day, but continuously. That doesn't mean stubbornly ignoring reality. It means refusing to abandon what you know is true simply because it hasn't manifested yet. Philosophically, consistency is the hallmark of any disciplined life. No philosopher, thinker, or leader ever achieved depth of understanding without repetition. Repeated study, repeated reflection, repeated action. So why should repeated speech be any different? If anything, it's even more foundational, because speech is the mechanism through which we reinforce beliefs. This is why the discipline of consistency is so powerful. It develops reliability within yourself. It teaches you that you can trust your own voice. It forms integrity between your words and your actions, and that integrity becomes a source of internal strength. When you say something long enough, you begin to feel obligated to live in alignment with it. Your standards rise to match your statements. Of course, the difficulty is not in knowing we should be consistent. The difficulty is in staying consistent when results seem delayed. That's where resilience comes in. That's where intention matters. That's where you make the choice to keep speaking even when emotion fluctuates, even when circumstances resist, even when doubt whispers in the background. But if you stay with it, something shifts. Consistency builds credibility with yourself, and credibility builds confidence. And confidence opens the door to change more quickly than any external circumstance can. So if you're speaking something into your future, about your health, your growth, your direction, your identity, don't stop because you don't see movement yet. The shift always begins inside long before it shows up outside. Stay steady. Stay rooted. Stay committed to the words that align with the person you're becoming. Because when you speak consistently, you're not just repeating words. You're building the future those words belong to. When we finally arrive at the idea of expectation, the belief that what you speak in faith will eventually take form, we're stepping into the culmination of everything discussed so far. You've set the direction with your words. You've aligned your speech with your deeper convictions rather than your immediate circumstances. You've practiced consistency even when the results were invisible. And now you reach the place where expectation becomes not just a feeling, but a posture. Expectation is not naive optimism. It's not the hope that maybe, if conditions are perfect, something will eventually shift. Expectation is an inner readiness. It's the stance of someone who has spoken long enough, aligned deeply enough, and stayed steady enough that they begin to anticipate the result. Not because they forced it, but because they've become the kind of person who naturally moves toward what they've been speaking all along. There's a psychological transformation that takes place here. When you expect something, your mind begins preparing for it. You notice possibilities you ignored before. You interpret events differently. You respond to opportunities with more courage. Expectation doesn't make the outcome appear magically. It makes you more attuned to the paths that lead toward it. It enriches your awareness. It sharpens your perception. It shifts your emotional state toward readiness. Think about how powerful that is. You're no longer waiting passively for circumstances to line up. You're stepping into a proactive mental atmosphere. Your behavior starts aligning with your belief. And once that alignment begins, the external world tends to rise to meet you. That alignment is the doorway through which most breakthroughs walk. From a philosophical perspective, expectation has always been tied to personal becoming. Human beings gravitate toward what they believe is possible for them, not what they wish was possible, but what they actually expect. If you expect disappointment, you unconsciously create conditions for it. If you expect growth, you lean toward behaviors that feed it. If you expect progress, you move with a sense of openness and momentum. It's not magic. It's the natural interplay between belief and action. Even spiritually, expectation is the final expression of faith. It's one thing to say something. It's another thing to anticipate its fulfillment. Expectation is the point where your words and your belief intersect. It's the internal evidence that your confession has taken root. And that's when your whole inner world starts cooperating with the direction of your speech. But here's the part people don't always talk about. Expectation requires vulnerability. To expect is to allow yourself to believe deeply, and believing deeply means risking disappointment. Many people avoid expectation because it feels safer not to hope for too much. But safety and transformation rarely walk together. You cannot live a significant life while protecting yourself from the possibility of unmet expectations. Growth requires internal courage. This is why expectation is such a powerful expression of maturity. You've repeated the right words. You've aligned with the right truths. You've committed to consistency. Now you allow yourself to believe that the process is working even before you see definitive proof. Expectation says, I'm preparing for what I've been speaking. And that preparation becomes a magnet for progress. Something else happens when you expect results. You start making decisions that match your belief. You invest more thoughtfully. You plan more confidently. You approach challenges with greater resolve. Nothing external has changed yet, but everything internal has. And because the inner world is the launching point for the outer world, the results begin to show up more naturally. You've seen this in people who succeed in any field. Before the results, there's a shift in posture. Their tone changes. Their decisions change. Their sense of identity changes. They start acting like someone who's already aligned with the outcome they're pursuing. And that inner shift is often what brings the external outcome into view. Expectation, then, is not a passive wish. It's an active stance. It's the quiet confidence that says, I've spoken it. I've aligned with it. I've stayed consistent with it. And now I'm preparing to step into it. That preparation becomes the evidence of your belief long before the result appears. So when you say something in faith, allow yourself to expect it. Let the expectation guide your choices. Let it influence your attitude. Let it shape your preparation. Because expectation is where faith matures into readiness. And readiness is what positions you to walk into the future you've been speaking. Expect what you speak. Because the moment you begin preparing for, it is the moment you start moving toward it.